But you can make a good case that bacteria are centrally involved in the movements of the continental plates. I can tell you the story of it if you like.
Yes, please.
Yeah, it's got to do with water, you see, because you have to have water for plate tectonics. The reason is that the water acts like a sort of lubricant.
Yes.
You know, as you probably know, part of the plate tectonics process is the rising up from the mid-oceanic ridges of a sort of semi-molten, very viscous rock from below, from deep below. It comes up, it solidifies and moves sideways. Yeah, and then eventually it sinks at the continental margins and goes back. Yeah, and as this plate of basalt rock moves sideways, it absorbs water. And there are certain chemicals in the rock that just love the oxygen in the water. And they want to get hold of that oxygen, and they do. They strip the oxygen out of the water, and that leaves free hydrogen. Now, hydrogen is so light that the Earth's gravitational field can't hold it down. And so it tries to escape back to space, where it really likes to be. You know, hydrogen likes to be in interstellar space. That's where it feels most comfortable. So it sort of tries to move out. And of course, if you lose all the hydrogen, which would eventually happen through this process and some others, but let's focus on this one, the Earth would lose its water because you have to have hydrogen to make water. The oxygen would be bound up in the rocks and the hydrogen would go off to space. And the Earth would dry out. But this doesn't happen because hydrogen is very important for metabolism. Living things need it to liberate energy from food molecules. And so bacteria in the sediments capture the hydrogen and use it to liberate energy. And by various means they recombine the hydrogen with the oxygen and reconstitute the water. So this means that thanks to the bacteria, water is maintained on the planet. And because there's water on the planet, plate tectonics can continue. And therefore the continents that ride on top of the basalt, seafloor basalt, like corks on top of water, those plates can then move around. And we can have mountain building and volcanoes and subduction zones, all because, well, in part because of what tiny little bacteria are doing down in the seabed sediments and capturing this hydrogen that would otherwise escape to space. This proves, it doesn't prove it, it demonstrates what Lynn Margulis has said, I think, several times, that it's the microbes that rule the world. Of course, unfortunately, now we are ruling the world, but it's really not our place to do that. It's the microbial realm that should be allowed to rule the world. For the last, say, 500 million years, they've been regulating, we've had multicellular life, like trees. Well, trees for maybe not 500 million years, but land plants. We've had recently great forests, and so now multicellular life has joined in the self-regulatory dance along with the bacteria. But when life first began, we think about 3,500 million years ago, basically all the regulation was down to the bacteria for perhaps 1,000 million years. And even after that, we only had unicellular or small nucleated organisms. So the microbes have been, let's call them microbes, have been involved with regulating the planet more or less on their own until the last 500 million years for the huge bulk of Gaia's lifetime. But there have been crises. There have been, well, let's say radical shifts of state of the Earth. One of the most radical, you could say, was when life first appeared, there must have been a radical shift in the atmosphere as the organisms began to draw down carbon dioxide for their photosynthesis and release methane from decomposition. So we probably had a methane-dominated atmosphere in the early days of the Earth. That was quite a radical shift. And then eventually there was another radical shift when oxygen began to become more abundant. And some people think around 2,000 or 2.6 billion years ago, suddenly oxygen became reasonably abundant in the atmosphere. And that caused a complete reorganization of the microbial biosphere because quite a lot of the microbes didn't like oxygen and they had to go and hide down in the sediments. And other microbes could appear, the predatory microbes that used oxygen could appear on the surface. So a complete reorganization. So it's not as if the whole of Gaia has remained nice and smooth all the time and everything's been hunky-dory and without too many disturbances. There have been tremendous disturbances from within, created from within the system itself, by the system itself. Huge reorganizations, sometimes caused by internal factors, sometimes by external factors. And the regulation hasn't been perfect either. You know, it's wobbled around. Sometimes dangerously hot, sometimes dangerously cold. It's like almost like a semi-drunken Gaia walking on a tightrope. Sometimes almost falling off into heating and recovering a bit, and then almost falling off into cooling. And she's managed to keep this going for 3,500 million years. And of course you could think of us as the latest disturbance to her self-regulatory dance.